Hi, this is the host. Today we are going to look at Europe's oldest spear tips, how Neanderthals hunted 300,000 years ago. In today's video, we will cover the recent discovery of bone fragments from animals slaughtered by Neanderthals at the site. In addition, we will discuss the archaeological evidence for projectile weapons found there. The bones were discovered during excavations carried out between 2008 and 2011 in Abri du Maras, better known as the Grotte de Mars, or simply the Mars Cave. The cave is located near the village of Micoquien in the department of the Hérault in southern France. It was here that a Neanderthal family group lived around 300,000 years ago. The remains of at least 14 individuals were found, including those of a female who died at around 40 years of age, a male at around 50 years of age, and a boy of around 12 years of age. They occupied the cave intermittently over a period of about 50,000 years. Other animal bones found in the layers of the same age as the Neanderthals point towards a long-term occupation. In the area, the archaeologists also uncovered flint tools, a bone tool, jewelry made from crushed seashells, hearths, charcoal, and pigments. Some of the animal bones had cut marks thought to have been made by sharp-edged tools. The traces of butchering show that the animals were processed very thoroughly. There are marks of chopping, scraping, and saw cuts. Some bones show clear traces of heat. It seems that the Neanderthals cooked their food in a stew. The meat was most likely torn off with stone tools, then boiled slowly over a low heat. Animal bones from more than 50 species were discovered at the site. Most of the animals were large mammals, such as deer, wild boars, bisons, and horses. But smaller animals were also hunted. These include badgers, hedgehogs, foxes, rabbits, and wolves. This variety of animals reflects the wealth of resources in the surrounding landscape, which must have been extremely rich in prey 300,000 years ago. What is particularly interesting is that some of the animals were brought into the cave whole. This includes the skull of a young deer. The deer may have been killed outside the cave, and its skull used as a trophy or perhaps to mark the entrance to their shelter. A similar skull was found further up the slope in an area where other Neanderthal groups had camped 30,000 years before. The two sites are separated by a 20,000-year gap. The return of the Neanderthals to the same place speaks of a strong attachment to this territory. The raw materials were available there, and the game was abundant. Large areas of southern France were covered by dense forests. The climate was warmer than it is now, but it was also damper. Rainfall was frequent and varied throughout the year. Rivers were full of fish, ponds, and lakes, teemed with mollusks and crustaceans. Large mammals grazed in the plains, and small mammals lived in the undergrowth. The Neanderthals followed the herds and picked off the animals one by one. They fed mainly on meat, but collected plants and edible fruits when they were in season. Most of the animal bones discovered in the cave are not recent. They come from layers of ash dating back more than 40,000 years. Some of them were burned intentionally, others during the Great Conflagration that destroyed the cave 33,000 years ago. But what do the burnt bones tell us about how Neanderthals hunted? Did they hunt with projectiles like modern humans? The answer is not simple. To find out more about the hunting techniques of the Neanderthals, we have to take a look at the injuries on the animal bones. Those discovered in the Mars Cave show that the Neanderthals used stone tools to cut the tendons and muscles of their prey. This is evident from the parallel incisions on the bones. However, these traces of workmanship cannot tell us whether the Neanderthals stalked their prey and killed it with a spear or whether they ambushed it with a projectile weapon. Spears and darts are typically associated with stalking. This form of hunting requires a lot of patience and skill. The hunter gets close to his prey and throws his dart at a vital spot, usually the chest. The projectile weapon, on the other hand, allows the hunter to attack from a distance. He does not have to get close to his prey, which reduces the risk of injury. To date, only a few archaeological sites in Europe contain evidence of the use of projectile weapons by Neanderthals. The best-known examples are the Dolny Vestonis in Moravia, the Altmühlmündung near the town of Manching in Bavaria, and the site of Pinsevent in northern France. At all three sites, arrowheads made from animal bone have been discovered. With the exception of the finds in Moravia, these arrowheads date to the late Neanderthal period. Until recently, it was assumed that the Neanderthals went extinct in this region 42,000 years ago. The discovery of bone fragments from the Mars cave now makes it clear that Neanderthals continued to live in southern France until at least 38,000 years ago. They were contemporary with the first modern humans who ventured into Europe. Until now, we did not know how they coped with the competition for food and living space. Recent studies of the animal bones show that the Neanderthals adapted to the changing conditions. Their diet became less diverse. Species that were easy prey disappeared, such as young reindeer, red deer, and wild boar. The Neanderthals were forced to switch to larger and more robust prey, such as bison. At the same time, they seem to have started using bows and arrows. In the past, it was believed that the bow and arrow was invented by modern humans in southern Africa. It was thought to have been developed independently several times by different human populations. We now know that Neanderthals also used this highly efficient weapon. But how do we know that? The thing is, shafts don't preserve well in the archaeological record. They break easily, and if they happen to break in a way that produces small fragments, they just get lost in the soil. So far, only a few dozen bone arrows have been recovered from European Neanderthal sites. But sometimes they leave behind wear patterns on the bones of their victims. Researchers led by anthropologist Helene Roth from the University of Southampton in the United Kingdom examined 177 bone fragments from the Mars cave in detail. Among these were 142 pieces from adult animals and 35 from younger specimens. The scientists looked for traces of wear from stone tools and projectiles. The bones of adult animals show numerous traces of cutting. This is typical of butchering with sharp stone tools. The researchers see this as evidence that the Neanderthals first dismantled their prey outside the cave and then took the meat inside. The bones of the young animals, on the other hand, show few traces of cutting, but many signs of percussion. They were probably hit by projectiles. In total, the scientists identified 10 bone fractures that were very likely caused by projectile weapons. 6 of the 10 fractures occurred on the ribs, 2 on the skull, and 1 each on a metacarpal and a vertebra. The ribs were almost all shattered, while the skull showed clear fracture lines. It is very unlikely that the Neanderthals could have caused such severe injuries by throwing stones. Even if they had used the largest boulders as projectiles, they would not have been able to produce such precise blows. Only a shaft with a pointed tip could have inflicted such damage. The researchers believe that the Neanderthals used a bow and arrow. The fact that the shafts broke the bones cleanly indicates that they were very light and slender. This is also indicated by the injuries to the skull and ribs. If the shafts had been thicker and heavier, they would have crushed the bones instead of breaking them. In addition, the shafts were equipped with sharp stone points. The researchers came to this conclusion because they discovered microscopic traces of wear on the bones. The tiny flakes resulted from the friction between the shaft, the stone point, and the bone. Interestingly, most of the arrows hit the ribs from the front. The animals were probably shot in the chest at a short distance. The shafts had a range of up to 100 meters. The Neanderthals positioned themselves at an advantage and fired at the animals while they were drinking or eating. This strategy allowed them to take down large prey without risking their own safety. It was previously thought that the Neanderthals lacked the strength and stamina to shoot a bow and arrow. In fact, they were stronger than modern humans of the same size. Given that the Neanderthals selected the optimal shooting positions and only attacked when the opportunity arose, we must conclude that they were intelligent and patient hunters. However, the use of projectile weapons did not save the Neanderthals from extinction. In southern France, too, they ultimately had to admit defeat against modern humans. The researchers say that the bones from Mikokian show that the Neanderthals were already using bows and arrows 300,000 years ago. But they argue that their extinction was not primarily due to a lack of technology, but to demographic factors. Neanderthal groups were much smaller than those of modern humans. This is one of the reasons why they fell so quickly. Another reason is that their genetic diversity was very low. This may have been due to repeated population bottlenecks. The genetic diversity determines the adaptability of a species. The lower it is, the less adaptable a species is. The Neanderthals were undoubtedly exterminated by modern humans, but this process was certainly not easy. They fought back fiercely to the end. What do you think of this new study? Was the extinction of the Neanderthals primarily due to a lack of technology, or was it rather a consequence of their small population numbers? Let us know your thoughts. Leave us a comment and let us know what you think of our video.